This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Yod Beis, and as we march towards the finale of this incredible Besechta, we like to once again dedicate today's shir as Chus Aliyas Neshama for Miriam Bas Eliezer, her son, a close friend and longtime learner of her Daf Chabura Baruch Hashem. The yard site is tomorrow on the siyum of this Masechta. Mir Tashem, the ganze Zchus HaTorah should bring up the neshama of Miriam Bas Eliezer to a higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. As well as we like all the learning to continue being an unestimable source of Rafua Shlima, the Koiches HaTorah that we cannot even fathom, bringing Tinok ben Miriam Ahuva closer to the Rafua Shlima, getting a little bit stronger, a little bit better each and every day. So we're holding on, Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, and we're at the Gemara, approximately 8 lines from the bottom of the second, very wide line. Says the Gemara, Tanarabanan, Yatsu Hein V'Laishu, Yatsu. The Pasuk says that they've gone out. We're still discussing the Yerni Dachas. Hein V'Loi Shluchin. What does it mean they went out, but not their shluchim? Anashim. Ein anashim b'chzui beis. Has to be at least two. There has to be at least two people who are worshiping the Avodah Zarah for the city to be condemned as such. Tavaracher anashim v'loi nashim, not woman. Anashim v'loi ketanim, woman and not men and not children. B'nei Belial, banim shaparku oil shamayim mitzavareyam. What's B'nei Belial? What does it mean? They are, quote-unquote, lawless, people who can't follow the rules. This means, banim, children, shaparku, ol shamayim isavareyam. They cast off the yoke of shamayim from their necks. Mikir b'cha, says the pasuk, v'loi min asfar, and not from a border. Yoshvei iram, v'lo yoshvei ir acheres, have to live in that city. Loimar, shetzricham edim asra l'chol echad, ve'echad, each and every one needs edim and asra. Says the Gemara, we're it's going to start sounding slightly tangential, discussing the division of Eretz Yisrael. But we'll see very quickly how the reason this is being brought on over here as our Mishnah is going to be the Mekar. It's Rav Yochanan Amar, Cholkin Ir Achas L'Shnei Shvatim. Says Rav Yochanan, we split up one city to two Shvatim, whereas Reish Lakish Amar, 4 lines from the bottom, Ein Cholkin Ir Achas L'Shnei Shvatim. So Eisi Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish, you Reish Lakish said we do not split up a city. Achum Adicha Me Oisa here. What did the Mishnah say? That for here Nidachas has to be for that city and then for that Sheva. My love. So it does in the implication. Asks Rav Yochanan to Reish Lakish, Avod Medichel Meisayir. So what's the only way that you could have both qualifications independently? Must be that there is a potential another shevet to the city. Answers the Gemara Loi, the Nafalei B'Yerusha. We're discussing that it came to him as Yerusha, but not that they actually split up the two different Shvatim. Inami Diavu Nialei Matana, you received it as a gift. Eisvei, one more time, Rav Yochanan asked Reish Lakish. Says in the Torah, Arim Tisha Mioshnei Hashvatim Ha'ila Tisha Mi'is, 9 cities from these two Shvatim. My love, how do you have 2 Shvatim in 9 cities? Arba Palgamehai, Arba Palgamehai. Each city is 4.5. So what do you see? So clearly you're splitting up one city to 2 Shvatim. If you have 4.5 in each, says Gemara, no Raya Loi Arba Mihai V'Chamish Mihai. Says the Gemara, but if that's true that it's 4 and 5, Yachi Lifresh Berushi, the pasuk should have specified which one had 4 and which one had 5. From the ambiguity in the pasuk, it sounds like that there is an easy and simple division, that it was indeed mixed the two with each other. So says the Gemara, as we turn over to Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph Kasha, this is indeed a Kasha. Now Rashi over here, an interesting Rashi, only interesting because we have this all over Shas, yet here Rashi explains that the word Kasha Loshan HaPasuk Hapsoi Kasha Litaretz L'Mandam Racholkin Avaloi Mitaisiv, but it's not completely fragged up, as we know the chilik between kasha, chilik between different lashonos in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tanu Ibayiluhu asks the Gemara a third kasha. Well, excuse me, not a third kasha. There were two kashas. Now Ibayilu says the Gemara, Hodchu me'ilei mai. If on their own, no one convinced them, but people on their own started worshiping idols. V'yadichu, and unfortunately, Mahu, what's halacha? V'yadichu amar Achmanav lo shetchu me'aleya. Does it have to be b'davka v'yadichu, and not that they did it on their own? That one of the qualifications that it needs to be someone else pushed them to worship the idols. Oidel more maybe afilu hotcha me'aleya. Says the Gemara, Tashima, bring your raya. Hadichu anashim ugedanim. Amai, what is the reason that if women or children were the ones to convince the others to worship idols, then it does not get a din of an ir nidachas? Amai lavikyotuchum eleihem. So if women and children push them, why don't we just say it as a din of doing it on your own? And it's not, because there's no din of ir nidachas. So must be that hotuchum eleihem. Says the Gemara, would not work. Answers the Gemara, no raya. Hanach basar nafshayu greda hani basar nashim uktanim gredia. Says the Gemara, you can't bring me a raya because Hanach, in the case where they did it on their own, therefore they're very strong. Basar nafshayu greda mamish, they're being drawn to their own. Whereas when it's women and children, you're right that women and children might not have the din creating the nidachas, but there's still someone convincing them to do this aveira. Therefore, not necessarily can we bring a raya. Continues the Gemara. Ad sheyoida. Excuse me, we just lost the place over here. Yes, ad sheyudach ruba. Continues the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, that you need to have the majority of the city. Heichi avdinan. Amar Rav Huna. Amar Rav Yehuda. Danin v'chayvshin. Says Rav Yehuda, we judge and we imprison them. We judge and we imprison them until we can figure out whether we have a roiv that are worshiping the avodah zara. Amle ula nimzata me'ane as dinan shalelu. Says Ula, know what it comes out? It comes out that you're delaying the judgment. Because if you're continuously putting them in jail and counting, then they're never going to have the judgment, the psak din until afterwards. Elam or Ula, that's not what you do. Danim v'cyclin. Says Ula, no. Each person, when convicted, he gets a din of skila, and then only afterwards we'll see whether the whole city has such a din or not. It's my Rav Yechlan Amar. Danim v'cyclin, or shagshama marbin lahen batei dinim. So Rav Yochanan says, like we just said, we dan them and we give them skila. Shlik says, no, we set up numerous batei dinim when we try to get everyone one psak din all at the same time. Eisvei, asked the Gemara of Rav Chama bar Yosi Rav Aishia. Says the Basik, Vaisesi es Ishao. Ayes Aisha ish v'isha tamaiti l'sharecha. They are brought out. We have tamaiti kol ir kula l'sharecha. So says the Gemara, if there's this critical din of being maisi l'sharecha to the gates, clearly asks the Gemara, you can't do the whole city at once. Ella rather explains the Gemara, marvelem bati dinim umainin b'dinehem. Says the Gemara, we set up multiple batei dinim and we investigate their cases. Maskinu lebezdin hagadol, and then we've been to the bezdin hagadol v'gamrlu deinayu, and they finish their psak dinin v'katli lehu, and they're all going to be killed simultaneously. Says the Gemara, so it's all going to come through only through the bezdin hagadol. And we go quoting the next part of the Mishnah, Hake takias yoshvi. You have to hit those who live in the city by charav, by the sword. The Mishnah explains that even the people who are just temporary in the city, passing by, they're counted as part of the city and will as well receive the same punishment. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan Achamarim Agamalim Ha'aver as Vimakim L'Makayim. camel drivers, wagon drivers, people traveling from place to place. Lanu b'seicha, those who are living in a city, and they were convinced to worship Avodah Zarah with it. If they're in the city for 30 days, they get the regular din of Sayif, and their money is lost. But says Gemara, we have a stira. Says a Mishnah, how much time do you have to be in a city to be considered as part of the city? You'd be not 30 days. So Amar Rava loy kasha. Why? Halam have mivnei masa, halam have miyasvei masa. Says the Gemara, different cases. When do you need 12 months? When to have a din of a b'nei masa. But when do we have a din of miyasei masa, that you are merely an inhabitant? But klape the din of avir nidakas, that will suffice. That is 30 days. V'hatanya, I'll bring you a raya. But it's someone who actually lives there. So we see the distinction that we just said, that it's going to depend on how long one is actually in the city and what level of citizen, what level is the person going to get. So destroy everything in it and everything in the city. It's called Shabbat, the rabbis. So the tzaddikim inside, their stuff is destroyed, but not the tzaddikim outside. Shalala, says the Pasuk, Shalal Shemayim, but not that which belongs to heaven. It's called Shalal, the rabbis. So Amar Rav Shivnei Amar Atayra Nichsei Tzaddikim Shebei Teicha Yavdu. Says the Gemara, you know why? Because Mikaram Lehem Sheiter B'Teicham. What caused these tzaddikim to live amongst them? Memoinam. Lefikach memoinam avad. Amar Marv, it's called Shalala Tikboitz, and all the booty you should gather together. So seemingly it is part of the city. Amar Rav Chisda B'Nikvatzim L'Teicha has a din of the city only if it can be gathered into the city to be burnt with everything else, but there will be a line which part of it will and part of it will not. Amar Rav Chisda Pikdainais Shalan She'ir Nidachas Pikadin, a deposit Mutarin. If you tell me it's a deposit of another city, then if it's now be gava, and that person is present, pshita de mutarin. Lav shlo, it's called shlo of the city that belongs to you. Vela did ho, it's his own pikadim, but it's in another city. Says, I don't understand. If you could gather together l'teicha, so that my mutarim, we should put together everything else. If you can't, then I'm rachad zimna. But we already says halacha prior. So answers Gemara lai lalam ir acheres the mavkidi b'teicha. Says the Gemara, it is considered ir acheres, but it's one that he has deposited there. What's the case? He accepted achrayis. I would have thought, given that even with the Kabbalah's achrayis, it's not considered his. So now says the Gemara, that's if you're in the city, that's if you're out of the city. Comes along Rav Chisda, says, what if the two coincide? Amar Rav Chisda, behema, let's see if an animal that's belonged half and half, asura, the is aser. Isa do, mutarim, says the Gemara, what's going here? My time of behema, command to pligadami. He said command to pligadami. Says the Gemara, the fundamental difference between behema and a doe. An animal is as if it was not divided, whereas a doe, of course, is much easier for division, if it will be considered as if it is divided. Asks the Gemara, Bai Rav Chisda. Asks Rav Chisda, those were all live animals. Says the Gemara, if you have a behema of an ir acheres, What is the halacha? Would shchita work to purify it midei nevela? Ficharav amrachmana and leisha shachta mishcha leishna katlamik. That doesn't make a difference. It's destroyed. Maybe once you do shchita, it would work. And now you don't have to destroy the animal. What's the halacha? Says the Gemara Teku. We're gonna have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to answer that one. Bai Rav Yosef asks. Bai Rav Yosef. Sheir nashim sidkaniyos mau. The hair of nashim sidkaniyos in an yarni dachas is it burned together with everything else? Amarava hadir shayis alser. Take by Tisraif that of a Rasha, says the Gemara, is aser. Take Zeraftik says you should gather and you shall burn. Mi she'enay mechaser al kavitza sreifa, gathering and burning. Yazesh v'chatalisha v'kavitza sreifa, you have to actually cut it off. Salam Arava v'pei nachris. If it's a sheitel, hechidam idim achaver b'kufa, then it's, if it's attached to the body, it's kufa dami. Lo yitzricha the tali, it's not on the body v'sintva. Kenichas thinking shabbateicha dami v'avad. Oidama kiv daili nafka kalavusha dami. Or no, once you take it off, it's a din of a lavash. Says the Gemara. Teku once again. We're gonna have to wait for the Navi to answer the kasha. When we move over to the end of the Mishnah, it's called Shalal Tikvait Al Teich Rechava. Where do you bring all the shalal, all the booty, 2 lines to the bottom to the town square? Tani Rabbanan Ein La Rechayv Ein Oisen Einas Dir Nicha Dachas Dir Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, no. In the Rechayv Eisla Rechayv build the Rechayv Meikim Limarsa Rechayv Meikar Mashma Mai Savar Rechayv Hashtanami Mashma. The machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva is going to be a fundamental machlokes. Do we say that when it says Rechava means Meikar, it had a town square? Or do we say Rechava and building it right now will work as well? With that, we turn over to Kufyud Beis, Amid Beis. Continues the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, Behekdeshais Shabayi Padeh, that which is a hektish in the city will be redeemed. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan Hayuba Kache Kadashim Kache Mizbeach Yamusu. If there are consecrated items, halacha is Yamusu, they have to be let die. Kache Betigabayis Yipadu could be redeemed. Trumais Yirkavu Ratsu Maiser Shenu Kisei Kodesh in Gaza you're gonna bury. Shemin Aimer Pei Masav Le Behemas Bechar Umaiser Shalala Prat Lekesev Hektish Vekeser Maiser. So 2 different sheets is what we do with everything. Says the Gemara, Amar, let's go deeper into the Tanakama. Why let the animal die? Yerashi is tavu. Let it graze until it gets a mum. And then if you sell it, people demand a double. Let the money at least go to the base of dish. The animal can't be brought, but at least sell it and bring the money. Rav Yechlan Amar, Zerach Rishayim Tayiva. No. Shlakish Amar, Mammon Bailim Ho. Bacha Bekachim Shachaya Bachriyusan. Rav Shimini Damar Mammon Bailim Mammon. To Amar Mammon Bailim Ho. So again, the Chiddush here is only going to be Lefir of Shimon that you own the animal. You have the mammonis in the animal. Hamid the Sefer of Shimon, Frakti Gemara, Rachel Avir of Shimon. In the reading of the Mishnah, it sounds shver. Explains the Gemara, you're right. Rather, we're kachim kalim. I'll leave it there. We're not talking about real kachim. Talking about minimized. Amar kachim kalim. Mama in bailim. I've kachim. Ma yiftu. Baratani seifa. Kachim the gabayis yiftu. Live like a day. Why do we write that the seifa kachim the gabayis? We write it about it itself. V'med varmum kachim kalim. Kachim. Yiftu says Gemara Kimadika Chatayi Shemesu Aleim Till Misa Asli Lobsik Alei. Since there are times that a wool did have to go Lemisa, therefore Lobsik Alei we do not differentiate. So ask the Gemara 1 second. Bishlam, I understand. Rav Yechlam Karish Lakish. Keder says that Risham Teiva. Risham might tell them Rav Yechlam Lacha. Can't read the Zevach Risham Teiva is where? Since here are changed, it has a din that it's considered change. And we continue at 2 dots. Samak in the middle of the Amir of Shimon. Oimer behemdecha v'loy behema shar meiser. Mayaskino, what's the case? If we're talking about Tamimim, an animal that a Baal Mum, then it's considered Shlal Shamayim belonging to heaven, and therefore you don't need a pasuk. Elabim Bailim Mumin Shlalin and it's your own. Therefore that's going to be the Chiddush. Amar Avina. So why wouldn't it work? So Ravina Loilam Balim woman, Mishasacha B'Teres Behentecha Yatsu Elu Sheina Cholim B'Teres Behentecha Ella B'Teres B'Charu Meiser the Shlala the Shlal Shemayim Ninu. And Nacham all this is pliga the Shmuel and Rishmuel Achal Akol Karev Akol Nifta my comer Hari comer Kol Shekarev Kshu Tam then Vinifta Kshu Balmom Mishal Imayit Kol Shekarev Kshu Tam Vedon Nifta Kshu Balmom then Kol Machar Meiser Behema or Meiser Mi Behema Nafka. That will be the halacha. And the Mishnah concluded that what happens Trumos Yerkavu. Trumos have to be left to rat. Amar Chesed Lashanu El Truma Biad Yisrael. Avol Truma Biad Koyek. If the money who this, if it's his money, therefore will indeed have to be burnt with the city. Maser Rev Yosei Meiser Sheni because it goes Ganzu. Aiva Meiser Sheni Biad Yisrael. Kish Biad Koyin Dami. So I say Ganzu should be burnt. Viktani Ganzu. Aliyat Mar Hachiyetma. Amar Rav Chesed Lashanu El Truma Biad Koyin. Avol Truma Biad Yisrael. Tinasein LeKoyin Shabir Acheres. Have to give it away in order to prevent it from being destroyed. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from Tan An Hasam next year. Amir Tzah Hashem.